have to fear is
in war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
You find your way to the intersection of faith and politics. WallBuilders Live. You can find out more on our website at wallbuilderslive.com and wallbuilders.com. You found us on a Friday, and every Friday we talk about good news from across the nation. Hence, Good News Friday. And you can get more of these on our website there. If you click on the archive section, we go back several months and archive those programs for you so you can get a little pick-me-up. And, guys, I'm looking forward to our good news today. Who wants to start?
I'm going to start today, Rick. We're going to go to the military. We have, over the past several years, covered the number of attacks, unprecedented attacks against traditional faith in the U.S. military. On the website, under a section we have calling Obama the most biblically hostile president in American history, we have a section purely on military attacks in his administration where they have stopped all sorts of stuff. Even though military Bibles have been given out since George Washington, not under this administration, even though for however long we've used military crests on the Bibles, not under this administration. This administration, they pulled Bibles out of hotel rooms that belong to the military, won't even let people have a choice on that. So there has been a lot of pushback. There's been a lot of noise made. We've made noise on that. A lot of other groups have. Todd Starnes with Fox News has just done a yeoman's job in bringing out what the administration has been doing on faith and made it a big national news story. And so a number of our friends in Congress have been calling in 4- and 5-star generals saying, hey, what is the deal here? What is going on? And particularly the Air Force has been the most frequent to capitulate. Mikey Weinstein, who had been a JAG officer some years ago, an Air Force JAG officer, appears to have had a direct line to the Pentagon. He even bragged about, and there's been articles about, where that within an hour, within minutes, 59 minutes, whatever it is, at the time he calls the Pentagon, they get that activity stopped on whatever base it was going on. So the atheist side has really had an advantage here, and it has been very discomforting. We're seeing guys that are being drummed out or in the process of being drummed out simply for expressing their faith or expressing biblical value. It's very hostile. It has never been that way before. So the U.S. Air Force has been under the gun. Again, a lot of congressmen have weighed in, and they have now come back with a report, because what they came out with several months ago was really a pretty scary document. It's their religious expression language in Air Force Instruction 1-1, and they said, well, you have to be neutral with religion. And that was interpreted that, okay, if I'm a commanding officer and I say something positive about faith, then I'm not being neutral, so I can't say anything about faith. What it was interpreted to be was you got to be silent about faith. And if somebody writes an article that says faith is a good deal, then you got to take that down because you're not being neutral. And so even though there was a base that had an article from an atheist on how he loved atheism, an article from another Christian from another guy that was a Christian on how faith was so positive, they took down the Christian article because they felt that wasn't being neutral. So neutral had been used as a term to kill faith, quite frankly. And the new standards are now out, and they actually look like they should. They look like the Constitution, and they look like the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And those are long-standing documents, one over 2 centuries old. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act is decades old. And the Air Force is now getting back in line with the rest of the country, and particularly for adults. You know, the courts have stepped in and said, well, you know, impressionable kids in elementary school, you got to protect them from adult expressions. But once you become an adult, you don't have to be protected from religion. You're a big boy now. You can put on your big boy pants and handle this. Except that in the military, they've been saying, oh no, we'll have to micromanage this because, you know, these guys apparently can't make their own decisions. Well, now we're back to adults being adults, and they can make decisions, and you don't have to suppress faith to be neutral on faith. So great news out of the Air Force. Kudos to Todd Carnes and to Chaplain Ron Cruz and so many others who have been out there on the forefront of this fight. it looks like a major victory in the U.S. Air Force.
Yeah, we've had so many negative programs on this topic over the last few years, and just having to bring out, what's happening and how bad it's been. It's great to get some good news and see a turn for the better, obviously, there for our men and women in uniform. Quick break, guys. We'll come back and get some good news in just a moment. Stay with us on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Although education has remained an emphasis in America for nearly 200 years, what has changed the most over that period of time is the philosophy of education. For example, while religion finds no place of refuge in our schools today, such was not the case at the time of our founding fathers. In fact, when the Delaware Indian chiefs brought their youth to be trained in America's schools, on June the 12th, 1779, George Washington told them, "You do well to wish to learn our arts and our way of life, and above all, the religion of Jesus Christ. These will make you a greater and happier people than you are. Congress will do everything they can to assist you in this wise intention." According to George Washington, what students learned above all in American education at the time of the Founding Fathers was the religion of Jesus Christ.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
We're back on WallBuilders Live. It's Good News Friday. I'm Rick Green here with David Barton and Tim Barton, and David shared some good news with us in our first segment. Tim, you're up.
Okay, well, this one is, I have an article about abortion, and what's interesting about this article is it's a study that identifies that abortions are no safer for women when it's legal than when it's illegal, which is interesting because one of the arguments had long been, and many arguments today about various topics. We talk about it with drugs and with so many things. If you make it legal, it'll be safer because people are going to do it anyway. Well, what this study reveals is that actually where it's legal and where it's illegal, speaking of abortion, where abortion is legal and where abortion is illegal, it actually has produced the same number of health risks for the mother who was having that child aborted, whether it was a legal abortion or an illegal abortion. It's still a very detrimental and negative health consequence for that mother, whether it's legal or illegal. So very interesting that now we have evidence that we really can change the whole argument of, well, we're not talking about make it legal so we can make it safer, which is what Planned Parenthood argues. That, well, you got to legalize it so we can make it safer. And ultimately, we know they're not interested in safer because when we try to bring those abortion clinics just up to the basic standard of health clinics that you would go to if you had the flu, they're capitulating, arguing, screaming, yelling, we can't do that, that's unfair. They're not really interested in what's the best for women. But now with these new studies coming out saying, wait a second, it doesn't matter whether it's a legal abortion or illegal. It's either thing is terrible for the mother. Very interesting to see this study about abortion.
Man, used to people be even afraid to do the study, let alone to announce results that go against the pro-abortion lobby out there. So this is, once again, we're becoming a more and more pro-life nation. The science, when you can see that baby in the womb, these studies that show how bad it is, not only the taking of the innocent life, but the way that it impacts the mother and the father.
And here's one kind of related to that, and it deals with the same pro-life arguments, but in a different sphere, and that's with stem cell research. You may remember that about 15 years ago when they were doing all the stuff on embryonic stem cell research, that they kept promising that we would have miracle cures within 5 to 10 years. 15, sorry, no cures yet. They are finding that they can take embryonic stem cells and make them into insulin-producing cells, and they can take embryonic stem cells and do other things with them. The problem is adult stem cells have already been doing that for a number of years. And so the new study that is out right now argues that embryonic stem cells are absolutely unnecessary because there is nothing they have discovered at all that's not already been done by adult stem cells, which are the ethical kind. In other words, with adult stem cells, no fertilized human person has to be killed. With adult stem cells, you can use placenta blood from the mother, from the umbilical cord, the placenta at the time the child is born. That is adult stem cells right there. They are able to use skin cells now and turn those into any type of cell they need. They can use cells from all sorts of parts of the body now. So no longer is there any need at all to do research to destroy human embryos simply because it's going to produce a miracle cure. Everything they're producing through that, we've been producing through adult stem cells without killing any embryos for a number of years now. So that's the new study that's out, which, it's like saying that abortions, if they are legal, they'll be safe. This notion that that embryonic stem cell will produce something that you can't get through adult stem cell, it's nonsense as well.
Yeah, guys, this is so two great good news on the side of the life issue. I can't remember the last time we had bad news on the life issue. We've really, the last couple of years have been really good in the right direction on the life issue.
Well, the bad news we have on the life issue is the libertarian viewpoint that government shouldn't be involved in life at all.
Yeah.
That's the bad news. When you say that ignore the Declaration of Independence, which says that among our God-given rights is first the right to life, and we've documented the Founding Fathers included abortion in that, the writings of James Wilson, John Witherspoon, and others. When they said first is a right to life, and by the way, Thomas Jefferson and others dealt with abortion in their legal codes, and they prohibited abortion because government has a responsibility to protect the right to life, including unborn life. When we can document the Declaration says that's a God-given right, and the Declaration says the purpose of government is to protect those rights, then when libertarians come out and say government has no business being involved in life issues, I'm sorry, you've just gone against the Declaration and the founding documents. The Constitution is the embodiment of the Declaration. Don't tell me you're pro-constitutional if you're against protecting inalienable rights.
Well, and this is one of the issues, too, where we misunderstand basic notions, where we've so politicized things that shouldn't be political. We talk about it often with pastors, where pastors fear, we can't touch political issues. And we talk about things like life or marriage, and those are today what are considered quote-unquote political issues. And we go, wait a second, the Bible speaks to those issues, so those aren't political issues, those are biblical issues. Well, the same thing as you look at the formation of our nation, go back to the Declaration, life was part of what we were wanting to protect and secure, because we value life. And the reason we value is because there's a creator who is the author and the giver of life, but government's job is to protect the rights that the creator has given us. And so libertarians, as much as they argue for freedom, absolutely I believe in freedom, and part of government's job.
I support many libertarian positions, but just not the moral libertarian position.
Well, but this is where logically we ought to be going, wait a second. If government's job is to protect our rights, not to define them, not to redefine them, not to give them, our rights have already been given. Your job is to protect what God has given. Well, one of the very first things God ever gave was life. And without life, none of your other freedoms matter. So as a libertarian, if you're concerned about freedom, life ought to be your very first issue, because without life, none of the other freedoms matter.
Amen. No doubt about it, guys. Got to take a quick break. We'll come back and get some good news. I don't know if it's going to be life. It's going to be a judicial decision. You guys are always going all across the country. That's what I like about Friday. It's like a grab bag of good news. Back in a moment here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Today, there are numerous documented accounts of individual students being disciplined simply for bringing a Bible to school. Fisher Ames would have been appalled at this open hostility toward the Bible. Fisher Ames was the founding father who authored the House of Representatives language for the First Amendment. In his day, he vehemently objected to any attempt to minimize the Bible at schools. In fact, he declared, "Why should not the Bible regain the place it once held as a school book? Its morals are pure, its examples captivating and noble. The reverence for the sacred book that is thus early impressed lasts long, and probably, if not impressed in infancy, never takes firm hold of the mind." Founding Father Fisher Ames, the man most responsible for the wording of the First Amendment, believed that the most important school book was the Bible.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
We're back for some more good news here on WallBuilders Live, and I'm reaching into my grab bag of good news here, guys. What am I going to find?
Well, Rick, as we were just talking in the last segment about the victories we've been seeing in life, the victories with this issue of abortion. Today, where we have 75% of abortion clinics closed in America, incredible things. One of the fun articles I have is really kind of indicative of why we've been seeing so many victories. Over the last couple of elections, we've done an incredible job of electing pro-life and pro-family people to Congress, both on the state and on the federal level. Well, this article came out just a couple weeks ago, and it identifies for the first time in U.S. history, there will be 21 pro-life women in Congress, with 5 new women being elected. Joni Ernst of Iowa in the Senate. You have Elise Stefanik in New York, Mia Love in Utah, Barbara Comstock in Virginia, and Mimi Walters from California. The last 4 going to the House. Just incredible things as we are looking at victories, and especially as Christians, we care about these moral issues. We care about the pro-life, the pro-family issues. And so now getting more people, and by the way, having 21 pro-life women, the most in U.S. history, that's incredible. Especially, by the way, let me point out, since there's such a war on women,
yeah,
it's amazing.
I was going to mention that because these are all Republicans, and Republicans got killed by the war on women, as you can tell.
We brutalize that. Yes, we are, as Republicans, we are so hostile to women that we elect them to represent us. It's really almost flabbergasting to process.
And these are not your grandmother's pro-life women either. There's a lot of young women in there.
You bet. There's a number of young. Matter of fact, we're going to have an interview shortly with the youngest female member of the U.S. Congress who's pro-life, and we've also got another interview that we're setting up with the youngest woman elected to a legislature in American history who's also pro-life. So, yeah, this war on women stuff, if Republicans don't get away from the life issue, they're going to get killed with this war on women stuff.
Yeah, right.
No question about it.
The good news is great news, really, because not only are good things happening, it's happening with this younger generation. It means, time's on our side. We're turning a generation that can win this issue.
Well, related to that, Rick, all 3 of us 2 weeks ago were in the Pro-Families Legislators Conference, and it was kind of fun being there because it's after the election. We specifically set that conference about 8 to 10 days after the election. It's time that they've been able to wrap up their campaigns. Now they're ready to kind of wind down for a little bit, and they're starting to think about what's coming up in the future session. So we have that conference, and it was really kind of fun to watch all the activity going between the sessions because everybody's on their phone. One of the guys there from Oklahoma came to the conference not knowing if he was a state rep or not. And while he was at the conference on the first night, he got the recount numbers, and he won, but I think 26 votes or something close like that, so he's all thrilled. And then while they were there, you had a couple of legislatures that flipped. They had been in recounts, and they went from a Democrat control to Republican control. And while you were there, we saw other folks that were on their phone and found out they had just been made the majority leader in the Senate. They're going to be running the Senate. Another one is they got the top 3 positions in the Senate in their state. And so watching all these guys, and I say guys, that's from Texas, that means ladies too. The new leader of the Senate Pro Tem in West Virginia is a lady, and she was part of the conference. And by the way, West Virginia has not had a Republican legislature in 83 years in West Virginia, and they do now. And so it was fun to see all these pro-life, pro-family people cranked into leadership in such a short period of time by that election. But that's typical of what we're seeing across the country. And by the way, when we covered this last week and 2 weeks ago, we didn't have all the final numbers in yet. But when we went into this particular election cycle, of the 99 chambers in the state legislatures, and yes, there's 50 states, and so there should be 100. No, Nebraska has a unicameral legislature. They only have 1 body, not 2. So there's 99 state bodies, and Republicans now control 68 of those state bodies. That's the most they've had since back in the 1920 time frame. So there's a lot of pro-life folks that are now in. We saw a lot of this change in 2010. We've talked before about the record number of pro-life laws passed out of these state legislatures. I mean, just across the country, we're seeing things move more and more and more toward the life direction.
This is great news, guys. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back with more good news here on WallBuilders Live. Have you ever wanted to learn more about the United States Constitution, but just felt like, man, the classes are boring, or it's just that old language from 200 years ago, or I don't know where to start? People want to know, but it gets frustrating because you don't know where to look for truth about the Constitution either. Well, we've got a special program for you available now called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green, and it's actually a teaching done on the Constitution at Independence Hall in the very room where the Constitution was framed. We take you both to Philadelphia, the cradle of liberty in Independence Hall, and to the WallBuilders Library, where David Barton brings the history to life to teach the original intent of our founding fathers. We call it the Quick Start Guide to the Constitution because in just a few hours through these videos, you will learn the Citizen's Guide to America's Constitution. You'll learn what you need to do to help save our constitutional republic. It's fun, it's entertaining, and it's going to inspire you to do your part to preserve freedom for future generations. It's called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green. You can find out more information on our website now at wallbuilders.com.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. It's Good News Friday. I'm Rick Green here with David Barton and Tim Barton. We're getting some good news from across the nation. And the last couple segments, guys, have been not just in one particular area of the country, but good news for across the nation on the life issues. What's next?
Well, more good news from across the nation. This study came out just a couple weeks ago, and with really what would seem to be a novel concept in society today. But the study pointed out that the best thing for kids, one of the best indicators and predeterminers for children of what their life is going to be is, drumroll, their parents. But specifically identified in the study is that when parents get married and they stay married and then they have kids and they stay married and they raise the kids and they stay married, their kids do better. Their kids, and by the way, in that marriage, one of the things, the American Enterprise Institute is one of many groups that have done this study, but they're the ones that came out with this new study, and they pointed out that the children who have parents that are married, they grow up in a wealthier position because you got two parents that are staying together, living together, not paying child support and they're together, they're married, they're wealthier, they're better educated, and they're better able to hold a job. And one of the interesting things about this study is one of the big reasons ordinary families are struggling, it says, is that fewer families are headed by married parents, which is interesting because the study identifies the reason that we have so many struggling kids in society is because they don't have a mom and a dad who are married who are raising them. So yet again, we are seeing evidence that exactly what the Bible teaches, where Jesus said, for this cause, one man, one woman, they are united together, and what God put together, let nobody come against. God intended for that marriage structure to be there, and from that marriage structure to raise families, and families do better, and this is the foundation of society. So whether you are a liberal, whether you are conservative, you're Democrat, you're independent, Republican, moderate, whatever you are, if you want to have a healthy society, then you ought to want to do what makes a healthy society, and study after study, and yet now another study is showing what makes the healthiest and best families are a married couple, man and a woman, who get together and stay together.
It goes back to John Adams. John Adams said, facts are stubborn things. And sure enough, and you know what? It really doesn't matter what your belief is, what your philosophy is. Your philosophy is not producing the same results the statistics show is the right arrangement. So if you think that a home is anything you want to define it as, that's fine. You can think that, and you can think that gravity takes people upward rather than downward. But there are objective facts, and they are stubborn things, and it makes it really hard to argue against. And that's amazing.
And the results are so obvious. Everybody really, at least everybody says they want the same thing, right? You want happy, productive kids, all that kind of stuff. Well, if you get the results doing A, B, and C, then do A, B, and C, and stop trying all these new ideas about how a family ought to work.
Well, and that really does say a lot also for parents. Because we live in a culture where divorce is becoming a very casual thing, and we are seeing fewer and fewer couples stay together for really their life, for the longevity of their life. And this is something that, I would encourage every married couple and guys with us going to church and doing, find find somewhere where you can go and you can get go to a marriage seminar where you can get someone to speak life in your marriage, give you encouragement, give you guidance and wisdom, because having a healthy marriage not only helps your kids, but it helps America as a nation. So this would be something I would challenge all our listeners. Find a marriage conference. Go to a marriage conference. Watch something online.
Go to a good marriage conference.
Absolutely.
You and I, we've all got a good friend, Tim Brooks. He's on the program very often. He's got a great marriage conference he does every year up in, was it a couple times a year, Tim?
He does once a year every fall in Branson, Missouri.
That's a fun place to go. So there's good conferences out there. Get into some good conferences. Tim's exactly right. Even if you've got a really healthy marriage, you go to these marriage conferences, you get great new ideas, great new perspectives. It's good, refreshing. Hebrews 2:1 says that you have to pay really constant attention to the things you've already heard, because it's kind of like a spare tire. It leaks out, and when you really want it, it's not there. So find a good marriage conference, go to one.
Well, one of the things that even Paul mentioned in Romans is faith comes by hearing, and hearing the word of God. Sometimes we've already heard something and we know it, but the more we hear it, the more it can build up our faith. And especially as we're an organization that we want to see America strengthened, one of the best things that can strengthen America is having better marriages, so we have better homes, which ultimately helps this nation.
And it starts with us taking that time to invest in that marriage. And I mean, just like you guys are talking about, we do that in our businesses, right? We go to How to Improve, and you have conferences. And as a lawyer, I have continuing legal education. Man, if we just take a fraction of that and spend it on our marriages, think about how healthier the whole country would be. Lots of good news for us today. David, Tim, thank you for so much good news. Folks, if you want more, go to WallBuildersLive.com. We appreciate you listening today.
We stand undivided.